On the day NASA was born, his parents stared down into the cradle and froze in horror. Their baby's head was so huge and round it could have its own orbit. Out of despair, or maybe dark humor, they decided to name him NASA, since his head clearly deserved a space program of its own. As NASA grew up, life didn't get any kinder. The kids in his neighborhood clowned him endlessly for his weird name. Tired of the mockery, he decided to become someone respected, someone whose name would stand for brilliance, not big head. He tried building some muscle to boost his confidence, but every push-up ended in tragedy. His oversized head kept tipping him over like a seesaw. By middle school, he was a determined little genius with a mission. One day, he proudly told his teacher that he wanted to attend the nation's top university. The teacher, unimpressed, told him that he'd need Einstein's brain, and a much richer family, to pull that off. But NASA wasn't fazed. He told her his name stood for limitless ambition. The teacher sighed and suggested he pick a more realistic backup plan, but the boy simply walked out, declaring that nothing in this universe could stop him. That evening, while walking home, NASA looked at his exam results and grinned. All A's again. For once, it felt like life was finally aligning with his dream. Unfortunately, life was also a master of betrayal. Across the street, he spotted her, the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. In that instant, all rational thought left his oversized skull. Without a second of hesitation, he began crossing the road, dreaming only of asking her name. Then came the truck. It hit him so hard that even the Grim Reaper flinched. Blood everywhere, pain in every cell. And yet, as he lay dying, all NASA could think was how unfair it was to die without knowing that girl's name. Through blurry vision, he saw her kneeling beside him, her face speckled with his blood. The panicked truck driver ran up, asking if NASA was alive. The girl calmly asked him to take NASA to the hospital. But the driver pointed out that she was also injured, having taken the brunt of the hit to save him. Before NASA could say a word, she turned to leave under the pale glow of the moon. As she walked away, his consciousness faded like a bad Wi-Fi signal. The truck driver began calling an ambulance, but suddenly NASA rose from the ground like a zombie in a horror movie. The driver screamed, probably rethinking his life choices. NASA, still bleeding, declared that he had to find that girl. She was too pretty to lose. And with that, our fool sprinted off into the night, half dead, but full of determination. After a marathon-worthy chase, he found her sitting at a bus stop. She was shocked to see him alive, let alone running after her. Trying to impress her, NASA dropped the cringiest pickup line imaginable. He asked if she was a star, because he was NASA and wanted to study her gravitational pull. To everyone's surprise, she didn't slap him. Instead, she smiled and told him to sit down. She gently wiped the blood off his face with a handkerchief, then handed him her coat. Before leaving, she warned him that with injuries like his, he could die any moment and that she'd call an ambulance. But as she stepped away, the idiot tried to stand and immediately collapsed like a cheap folding chair. She sighed, pointing out that his legs were broken, and told him to please stay put. As NASA's vision dimmed again, he gathered what little strength he had left. He told the girl she reminded him of Princess Kaguya, the beautiful moon princess from the old Japanese tale. Since they might never meet again, he confessed his love and begged for a chance to go on a date with her. The girl, half amused and half concerned, said she'd only date him if he married her. Naturally, the hopeless romantic agreed on the spot, and promptly passed out. Days later, he woke up in a hospital, confined to a wheelchair. His grades were perfect, but his heart was in shambles. He couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious girl who had saved him, and vanished. Even though he topped his class, he decided not to attend the best university after all. Instead, he took a humble service job, hoping their paths would cross again. They didn't. Years passed, and when NASA turned 18, there were no parties, no friends, and no cake. Just him, in his dark room, thinking about the girl who had once called him her husband. One gloomy afternoon, NASA's uneventful life took another unexpected turn when his doorbell rang. He opened the door, and his brain immediately short-circuited. Standing there was the girl, the same stunning stranger who had once saved his life from becoming road pizza. She introduced herself as Tsukasa, and in his flustered panic, NASA tried to respond coolly, but what came out sounded more like Mayasa Suasa. She politely ignored the nonsense, stepped inside his tiny apartment, and accepted a cup of tea like it was the most normal thing in the world. Then, as casually as one might present a grocery list, Tsukasa pulled out a marriage certificate and asked him to sign it. NASA froze. He had assumed the whole "let's get married" thing was just an adrenaline-fueled joke from the night of the accident. But Tsukasa seemed serious. Dead serious. She even said it was fine if he didn't want to sign. That reverse psychology worked faster than rocket fuel. Before she could finish her sentence, NASA grabbed the paper and signed it at a speed that would make a ninja jealous. Tsukasa smiled softly, saying she had a good sense for people and believed he'd take care of her. And just like that, the newly minted couple headed off to the marriage registration office. On the way, NASA realized that Tsukasa was the only person on Earth who hadn't mocked his name. She actually liked it. She explained that NASA wasn't weird at all. It reminded her of brilliant scientists and engineers working together to fulfill humanity's dream of reaching space. Hearing that made his oversized head swell with pride. When they arrived, the clerk at the marriage office, an old bachelor with the charisma of a wet towel, was shocked to see such a young couple tying the knot. He signed their papers anyway, handed them a flower as a wedding gift, and muttered something about kids these days. That night, NASA paced around his room in disbelief. He was now married, legally. Emotionally, absolutely not ready. His apartment could barely fit one person, and there was only a single bed. The problem was obvious. Where would his new wife sleep? He considered buying a second bed, but it was late, and deliveries wouldn't arrive until the next day. So, like a man possessed, he began muttering to himself, analyzing possible sleeping arrangements. Maybe diagonally? Maybe bunk style? Tsukasa suddenly appeared behind him, suitcase in hand, and asked why he was talking to himself like a lunatic. She then announced that she was there to begin their new life together. NASA made her a cup of coffee, his go-to move when panicking, and Tsukasa mentioned that she didn't have a home to return to. From that night on, she'd be staying with him permanently. The statement nearly shut down NASA's nervous system. When she noticed how tiny the bed was, Tsukasa offered to stay at a hotel instead. The idea made NASA's soul deflate faster than a balloon, but she quickly reassured him, saying that even though his apartment was barely fit for a raccoon, she was his wife now and wouldn't leave him. NASA stared at her, genuinely confused why a gorgeous girl would want to live with a broke nobody who owned exactly one pillow and half a chair. He finally asked her why she'd married him when they barely knew each other. Tsukasa replied calmly that it was a silly question, then fired it back at him. He blurted that he'd married her because he loved her. She smiled faintly and said she wouldn't marry someone she didn't love either. Then, pretending to leave for the hotel, she turned, but NASA panicked, sprinted after her, and begged her to stay. He even promised to buy her a futon, even if it meant walking to the ends of the earth to find one. Tsukasa relented, and the two headed to a convenience store. There, NASA shocked her with his encyclopedic knowledge of futons. Apparently, he knew more about betting than the manufacturer's website. She held his hand as they browsed, and for the first time, the awkward newlyweds looked almost normal. Hours later, they returned to his shoebox apartment with a new mattress. Tsukasa found it surprisingly comfy, while NASA just stared at her in disbelief that an actual woman, an attractive one, was now sleeping under his roof. When she asked for the bathroom, NASA sheepishly admitted he didn't have one. He used the local public bath every morning. Unbothered, she suggested they take a stroll to buy some toiletries first. Later, NASA returned from the store with a bag full of female essentials, and Tsukasa changed into pajamas. Seeing her like that, NASA nearly spat out his drink. She looked even prettier dressed casually, which was unfair to his already overloaded heart. That night, they turned off the lights and went to bed. NASA couldn't sleep. There was a girl next to him for the first time in his life, and his heart was pounding faster than a drumline on caffeine. Then he noticed she was a restless sleeper. In a rare display of bravery, he tucked her back in gently and almost leaned in for a goodnight kiss. Then realized that kissing someone unconscious was not the move. Moments later, Tsukasa sleepwalked to the kitchen for water, then returned and promptly stole his blanket. He spent the rest of the night freezing and questioning his life choices. The next morning, Nasa woke up convinced everything had been a dream, until he saw Tsukasa calmly making breakfast. When she started changing out of her pajamas right in front of him, he screamed like a kettle and retreated to give her privacy. When he returned, she was wearing an apron, asking why he kept addressing her so formally when they were already married. They decided to give each other nicknames, which made Tsukasa blush bright red. Later, she opened his fridge and was impressed. It was organized and fully stocked. Unlike most Gen Z men who survived on takeout, Nasa could actually cook. He proudly explained that he'd done a scientific study on adult male nutrition and concluded that eating hot pot daily was the secret to a long life. Tsukasa laughed, saying cooking wasn't chemistry, and proceeded to whip up a meal so good it could win a cooking show. Nasa took one bite and instantly realized her food was on another level. After dinner, she mentioned the nearby bathhouse. Nasa froze, suddenly realizing he hadn't bathed for days. Embarrassed, he grabbed his things, and they went shopping for skincare products. Nasa stared blankly at the endless array of moisturizers, toners, and creams. He'd been a soap-only man his entire life. Finally, they arrived at the public bathhouse, where, to his horror, or luck, depending on your point of view, Nasa ran into one of his old classmates, Kaname. And so began the next chapter of Nasa's ridiculous, heartwarming, and slightly embarrassing married life. When Nasa and his new wife, Tsukasa, visited the local bathhouse, they ran into Konami, one of Nasa's old classmates. Konami nearly dropped her broom in shock. She had always assumed that Nasa's meat would someday be donated to a museum as an unused antique. Not that he'd actually have a girlfriend, much less a wife. Nasa awkwardly introduced Tsukasa, while Konami, still trying to process this miracle of romance, welcomed them warmly. She explained that she had been managing the bathhouse for her family for years. However, she couldn't help but notice the strange spark between Nasa and Tsukasa. When she asked if they were dating, Nasa casually mentioned they were married. That one word broke her brain. She stood frozen for a moment before collapsing in disbelief. After recovering, she congratulated them, offering a free bath as a wedding gift, partly out of kindness and partly out of confusion. As Tsukasa went in for her bath, Nasa tried to follow, only for Konami to block his way with her broom like a Jedi with a mop. She scolded him, admitting she never believed he'd actually get married. In her mind, Nasa had been destined to stay single until 70 and achieve wizard status. When she asked about their wedding ceremony, Nasa shrugged and said ceremonies were just a waste of money nowadays. That triggered a fierce lecture from Konami, who said a real man should make his wife happy, not cheap out on her dreams. Nasa, suddenly inspired, clenched his fists dramatically and vowed to make Tsukasa the happiest woman alive. Unfortunately, Tsukasa overheard this passionate declaration and nearly died of embarrassment watching her husband yell, "I'll make her happy, forever," in public like a soap opera hero. After his bath, Nasa fantasized about catching a glimpse of his wife in her full celestial glory. But before he could finish the thought, Konami teased him mercilessly, joking that she expected no less from someone with a tiny rocket. Meanwhile, inside the women's bath, Tsukasa's peaceful soak was interrupted when Aya, Konami's older sister, wandered in by mistake. Horrified, Aya apologized a dozen times before offering to wash Tsukasa's back as a sign of sincerity. While chatting, she complimented Tsukasa's skin, comparing it to silk, then an iPhone X, then immediately apologized again for being weird. As they talked, Aya realized Tsukasa shared Nasa's surname. When asked if she was related to him, Tsukasa panicked and lied that she was his younger sister. Later that night, Nasa dreamed about the day they first met, but woke up to find Tsukasa shaking him and saying her bath was over. When Aya approached, she greeted Nasa and mentioned meeting his little sister. Confused, Nasa just went along with it. Aya then explained she and Nasa were classmates and that her family's bathhouse had fallen on hard times after her grandfather passed. She thanked Nasa for helping them revive business using marketing tips he learned from YouTube. As Nasa and Tsukasa walked home, Tsukasa asked if Aya was pretty. The clueless man nodded enthusiastically and began describing her beauty in painful detail. Tsukasa's smile faded faster than his brain cells. On their walk, they passed by a wedding ceremony. Nasa noticed Tsukasa's mood sour and, remembering Konami's words, assumed she was upset they hadn't had one. In reality, she just wanted him to say she was pretty. Instead of doing that simple task, the idiot panicked, handed her the apartment key, and bolted down the street shouting that he'd make the impossible possible. Tsukasa just stood there, confused. Apparently, telling her she looked good was the impossible task. Later, back at the apartment, Tsukasa grew lonely. To kill time, she started cleaning, but the place was already spotless, a rare trait for a man. She debated cleaning under the bed but decided against it, suspecting NASA might be hiding a stash of thirsty magazines. Then, the doorbell rang. At the door stood a blonde girl named Chitos, or Cheeto, as NASA jokingly called her later. Cheetos immediately mocked the tiny apartment, calling it worse than a kennel. Tsukasa calmly slammed the door in her face. Furious, Cheetos banged on the door, shouting that Tsukasa's sudden disappearance had worried her grandmother sick. Tsukasa opened the door again just to inform her that she was now married and had no intention of returning home. She slammed the door once more. Heartbroken, Cheetos sat on the stairs crying. That's when NASA came home and found her. He comforted her, not realizing he was walking straight into emotional quicksand. She tearfully explained that she was worried about a family member who'd flown away, describing Tsukasa as a fragile, glass-like butterfly who would vanish if left alone. Just then, Tsukasa's voice called out from the apartment. Cheetos froze as the puzzle pieces clicked. The runaway she'd been lamenting over was married to this doofus. Enraged, Cheetos grabbed NASA by the collar and kidnapped him. Yes, actually kidnapped him, and drove him straight to her family's massive mansion. Inside, she told NASA that she'd ruin him with incriminating photos unless he divorced Tsukasa. She summoned two beautiful maids, Charlotte and Aurora, to assist. Charlotte immediately began undressing, eager to get to work, but Cheetos yanked a blanket over her and told her to chill. While they argued, NASA escaped and wandered through the mansion, using his inner nerd senses to analyze the atmosphere. He stumbled into a room displaying what looked like a moon rock, and somehow, with that huge brain of his, correctly identified it as the real thing. He wondered how Tsukasa had ever owned something so rare. Before he could ponder further, Charlotte stormed in, wielding a massive sword and threatening to turn him into space dust. During her wild swing, she accidentally shattered the glass case protecting the moon rock, releasing nitrogen. NASA, thinking fast, repaired it using his electrician skills, and probably more luck than science. When Cheetos returned, she was stunned that the clumsy nerd had actually saved the artifact. She revealed that the moon rock had originally belonged to Tsukasa, which made her question how little NASA truly knew about his own wife. She grew bitter, remembering how Tsukasa once saved her during a mountain climbing accident as a child, and now felt betrayed that such an extraordinary girl had married this clueless moron. To humiliate him, Cheetos ordered Charlotte and Aurora to carry out their infidelity plan. Aurora snapped photos while Charlotte posed, and within minutes, they photoshopped realistic cheating pictures with lightning speed. When NASA saw the edited photos, he almost fainted from disbelief. Moments later, Tsukasa entered the room, saw the pictures, and frowned. Cheetos urged her to divorce the terrible man, but Tsukasa calmly asked to speak with her husband alone. It was a trick. The couple used the opportunity to escape. Outside, NASA apologized, swearing he'd been framed. Tsukasa smiled knowingly, saying she wasn't stupid. She could tell the photos were fake. Meanwhile, Cheetos and her maids realized they'd been duped. As they chased after the couple, Tsukasa revealed a secret passage leading to an old church. Inside the church, NASA seized the moment, dropped to one knee, and proposed properly this time, declaring his undying love. And for the first time ever, he kissed his wife. The next day, Tsukasa tried watching TV, only to discover that her husband didn't even own one. Even worse, the man didn't know a single thing about shows or movies. She looked at him with disbelief, wondering aloud, "What on earth have you been doing all your life?" The answer clearly was overcomplicating everything. NASA's wife had taken it upon herself to give him what could only be described as a passionate TED Talk, though it was less about technology and more about television. She lectured him on how vital TV was to the life of any self-respecting otaku. NASA, who had always seen her as calm and composed, was shocked to discover that beneath her soft voice was a fiery vixen whenever movies or shows were involved. Amused and a little intimidated, Nasa decided they needed a TV right away. The two went shopping, and Tsukasa, ever the practical one, suggested they go for a cheap model, saying she'd be happy with anything that played her favorite dramas. Later that day at the bathhouse, Nasa proudly announced to Konami that he had proposed to Tsukasa. Konami blinked, looked him up and down, and asked the obvious question. "Did you even buy her a ring?" Nasa, being his usual clueless self, admitted he hadn't thought that part was important. Konami nearly exploded. She told him that a ring was one of the top 3 essentials in any marriage, right after love and not being a total idiot. While waiting for Tsukasa to finish her bath, Nasa absent-mindedly watched a TV commercial featuring a couple flashing diamond engagement rings. Suddenly inspired, he began wondering how much one of those sparkling tokens of love might cost. On their way home, Nasa told Tsukasa he'd be heading to work that afternoon. They stopped by a park to rest, and while she enjoyed the scenery, he overthought everything, as usual. He worried she'd feel lonely when he was gone and concluded, quite dramatically, that buying her a diamond ring would make sure she'd think of him whenever he wasn't around. Back home, Nasa nervously mentioned he was leaving for work, still half expecting to return and find Tsukasa gone forever. She simply smiled and told him to come home on time, promising she'd be waiting. That evening, as they ate dinner together, Nasa finally brought up his brilliant idea of getting a diamond engagement ring. Tsukasa stared at him, bewildered but secretly impressed by the rare flash of romance. Then she patiently explained that they were already married, so what he needed wasn't an engagement ring, but a wedding ring. It quickly became clear the poor man didn't even know the difference. After a crash course in Rings 101, Nasa was even more determined to buy a diamond wedding ring. Tsukasa warned him it would cost a fortune, but stubbornness was his superpower. Seeing she couldn't change his mind, she decided he'd have to learn the hard way. The next day, she took him to an upscale jewelry store. The price tags nearly gave Nasa a heart attack. The saleswoman, sensing a potential sucker, explained that these diamonds were of the highest quality and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Nasa, of course, was ready to spend his entire family savings until Tsukasa dragged him out before he could bankrupt himself. She explained that she only wanted to show him how expensive such rings were, not have him buy one. But when it became clear he wasn't giving up, she brought him to a more modest store. The prices were lower, but to Tsukasa, still unreasonably high. Finally, Nasa confessed his true reason. He wanted her to have something that would remind her of him whenever they were apart. That genuine thought melted Tsukasa's heart, so she rewarded him with a gentle kiss on the cheek. Then, out of pity and love, she led him to the cheapest store in town, where they bought a ring so inexpensive it probably came with free disappointment. Still, Tsukasa reassured him that the price didn't matter. The thought behind it was priceless, and every time she looked at that little ring, she'd remember how much he loved her. Over the next few nights, Nasa began noticing his wife's odd sleeping habits. She often sleepwalked, wandering around, grabbing water, and dozing off in random places. One night, she even crawled into his bed mid-dream, then promptly fell asleep on the floor after kissing him half awake. Her nightly adventures made it nearly impossible for him to sleep, so the next morning he declared something had to change. He decided they needed a bigger bed, but their tiny apartment couldn't fit one. He began daydreaming about a larger home, with a living room, a giant TV, and maybe even space to breathe. Excited, he asked Tsukasa if she'd like to move somewhere bigger. To his surprise, she preferred their small place, saying its coziness kept them close. When Konami heard they were considering moving, she was appalled that Tsukasa had been sleeping on the floor. She told Nasa that if her husband ever made her live like that, she'd turn him into a floor mat. Later that evening, Nasa accidentally walked in on Tsukasa while she was changing, catching an unintentional glimpse of her forbidden territories. Flustered beyond belief, he blurted out that they had to move to avoid more embarrassing encounters. Tsukasa worried about the cost, but Nasa promised a bigger place meant a home theater and a bookshelf for her movie collection. That idea lit her up immediately, and soon, they began apartment hunting. However, when they learned they needed a guarantor, Nasa realized he hadn't even told his parents he was married. In a panic, he called his mom, blurted out the news, and hung up before she could faint. He explained to Tsukasa that his parents also knew about his accident and how she had saved him. Since they'd need his parents' help with the new place, they decided it was time for her to meet them. Soon after, Nasa received a text from his mom, who, being no fool, guessed he only called because he wanted financial help. She agreed to assist, but on one condition: they had to visit her first. Since his parents lived in another prefecture, Nasa thought it would be the perfect excuse for a little honeymoon. Tsukasa agreed and suggested they buy a camera to document their trip in a photo diary. Their journey began beautifully. They took photos by the lake, where Nasa discovered he actually had a talent for photography. The next day, they continued on to Kyoto, snapping memories together along the way, proving that even two broke newlyweds could live a story worth remembering. Meanwhile, Chitose and her loyal maid had been secretly spying on Nasa and Tsukasa, trying to figure out why the newlyweds were taking a slow, humble bus instead of the luxurious high-speed rail. Perplexed but determined, Chitose decided to follow them by car, because, apparently, stalking a couple was now part of her daily cardio routine. Inside the bus, Tsukasa had already dozed off, resting peacefully like a cat on a sunny windowsill. Nasa, however, couldn't quite get comfortable in his seat, but he stubbornly pretended everything was fine. After all, he couldn't let his wife see him defeated by upholstery. As they rested, Chitose watched them from afar, growing green with envy and loudly declaring her mission to break the couple apart. Her frustration only deepened when she noticed how close Nasa and Tsukasa had become. In contrast, Charlotte and Aurora, her ever-observant companions, whispered that the couple actually looked adorable together and questioned why their mistress was so intent on ruining such a sweet relationship. Chitose, of course, silenced them immediately, claiming with dramatic confidence that all newlyweds eventually ran into problems on their honeymoon. When the bus made a stop, Nasa suddenly realized he had misplaced his wallet. Without hesitation, he sprinted back to the bus to find it. Watching this, Chitose couldn't contain her evil laughter. "What an airhead," she thought gleefully, convinced that this foolish act would surely infuriate Tsukasa. But to her surprise, Tsukasa didn't seem angry at all. She just smiled at his silly behavior. This naturally made Chitose even more annoyed. Later, Nasa suggested they grab a bite at the food court, but Tsukasa insisted, rather loudly, that they should try something unique instead of settling for boring chain restaurant food. They ended up trying a dish spiced with lime, and Nasa, ever the romantic, took a few questionable pictures of Tsukasa eating, which understandably made her a little embarrassed. Watching from a distance, Chitose fully expected this tiny dispute to spark a lover's quarrel. But instead, Nasa calmly told Tsukasa she could eat whatever she wanted. She responded by choosing melon bread, and just like that, peace was restored. Chitose, however, was fuming. Unable to contain herself, she confronted Tsukasa directly, scoffing that she was disappointed in her for acting so lovey-dovey with that donkey. Tsukasa, unfazed, simply replied that she was just a normal girl in love. Before the argument could escalate, a TV crew suddenly arrived to shoot a local food segment, giving the couple a perfect excuse to sneak away before they ended up on national television. Back on the bus, Tsukasa grew thoughtful, confessing her worries that Nasa's parents might not approve of their marriage. Nasa gently assured her that he'd convince them. Meanwhile, Chitose, still determined to catch up, ordered her maids to pursue the runaway couple. Unfortunately for her, the maids were too busy devouring food at the market, eating like they hadn't seen a meal in days. Hours later, the couple finally arrived in Kyoto. Nasa was practically glowing with excitement, eager to explore the city's rich culture and history. Tsukasa, however, seemed far more interested in visiting Kyoto's famous bakeries, a revelation that nearly made Nasa's brain short-circuit. "We have over 1,000 bakeries back in Tokyo," he protested. "Shouldn't we see the shrines and temples?" But he quickly realized that Tsukasa was a true member of the Gen Z tribe, the kind of person who could scroll through history without stopping to read it. Still, Tsukasa agreed to accompany him to see some of Kyoto's landmarks. When she tried on a kimono, Nasa was completely stunned, his brain practically fried on the spot. Just then, fate, or bad luck, struck again. Chitose and her maids appeared, clearly having caught up to them. Trying to diffuse the tension, Nasa suggested that Charlotte and Aurora take Tsukasa around the city while he had a private conversation with Chitose. Once alone, Chitose announced that she wanted to pretend to be his girlfriend, a test, she said, to see if he was truly man enough for Tsukasa. Nasa, determined to prove himself, agreed and suggested they talk during a rickshaw ride. Meanwhile, at a nearby cafe, the maids questioned Tsukasa about her feelings for Nasa and why she had chosen to marry someone so ordinary. Tsukasa blushed and confessed that she found him cute and loved how he always praised her in front of others, her eyes softening as she recalled their moments together. Meanwhile, Nasa took Chitose to a popular dango shop. There, Chitose demanded to know why he loved Tsukasa. Without hesitation, Nasa began enthusiastically describing how adorable and kind Tsukasa was, a speech that only fueled Chitose's irritation. She cut him off, declaring that he knew nothing about his own wife. She claimed she knew Tsukasa better, pointing out her athletic skills and calm personality, before storming out in frustration, muttering that she couldn't believe Tsukasa had chosen to marry such a clueless dweeb. Left alone, Nasa reflected for a moment, then revealed that Tsukasa had saved his life 2 years earlier when a truck nearly hit him. From that moment, he'd felt destined to be with her. He admitted that even though he might not know everything about her, he intended to spend his life proving their love was real. Later that day, Tsukasa asked whether he'd managed to convince Chitose to accept their relationship. Nasa smiled and told her that Chitose had decided to return to Tokyo, for now. Relieved, the couple boarded another bus and set off for Nara, where Nasa's parents lived. On the way, Nasa explained that although he had grown up in Tokyo, his parents had moved to Nara because his father was an archaeologist and his mother loved deer, a combination that made perfect sense in a family as eccentric as his. Tsukasa, slightly worried, asked if she would get along with them. Nasa reassured her with confidence, and maybe a little denial, that everything would be fine. When they finally arrived, both were a bundle of nerves. They tried to cheer each other up, only to realize that Nasa's mother, Kanoka, was already spying on them from the window like a professional stalker. They entered the house, where Kanoka introduced herself with the kind of chaotic energy that made her seem like she'd escaped from an anime asylum. She then revealed that Nasa's father, Enishi, had been so nervous about their arrival that he hadn't moved all day, a fact that didn't exactly calm anyone's nerves. After settling in, Nasa and Tsukasa finally sat down with his parents. Things started off normally, until Nasa's wonderfully weird parents began acting like they were in the middle of a shared hallucination. One minute they were talking about archaeology, the next they were discussing deer spirits. Suddenly, Enishi insisted that Nasa take a bath, immediately. Nasa tried to refuse, but Tsukasa gently encouraged him to go, hoping to have a quiet word with his parents while he was gone. While Nasa bathed, Tsukasa had a surprisingly good conversation with Enishi, though she later decided to keep the details a secret. When Nasa returned, the atmosphere had relaxed a bit. They moved to his old bedroom, which looked exactly like a time capsule of teenage awkwardness, outdated posters and all. Just when they thought they could unwind, Kanoka popped in with a grin and asked if they planned to spend the night there. When Nasa said yes, she casually reminded him that the bedroom walls weren't soundproof, in case of any, well, happy noises. Tsukasa nearly combusted from embarrassment, and Nasa's soul practically left his body. Later that night, the couple finally lay down to rest. Nasa, trying to act cool, asked Tsukasa if she'd sleep on his arm. She smiled and agreed, snuggling closer. For a while, it was peaceful, until his arm fell asleep and went completely numb. Refusing to ruin the moment, he awkwardly whispered for a goodnight kiss instead. Tsukasa giggled, leaned in, and obliged. With that, the two drifted off, exchanging a soft, warm kiss that could have melted an iceberg. The next morning, Tsukasa woke up early to watch the sunrise. Enishi joined her in the garden, surprised to find her awake before anyone else. When she casually called him father-in-law, the poor man nearly suffered a heart attack on the spot. After he recovered, the two shared small talk about history, life, and his research. Enishi then led her to his private library, showing off his collection of ancient manuscripts. To his amazement, Tsukasa began reading the old texts with ease. When Nasa arrived, he was just as shocked. Apparently, his wife had a few secrets she hadn't mentioned before. Later, Tsukasa explained that even though she wasn't particularly fond of historical sites, she planned to make Nara memorable by taking pictures of him at old shrines. The couple then spent the day exploring, starting with the Great Buddha statue. Tsukasa spent half the visit snapping embarrassing selfies of Nasa's goofy expressions, and honestly, he looked like a tourist who'd lost his tour group. Still, he couldn't help but laugh at her enthusiasm. As they continued sightseeing, Nasa was pleasantly surprised by Tsukasa's unexpected knowledge of history. When he complimented her, she simply shrugged and credited it to her good memory. Before long, Nasa suggested they take a selfie together, like a normal couple. Tsukasa blushed, but agreed. They posed sweetly, though she couldn't shake the feeling that he was using the photo as an excuse to sneak in a little shoulder contact. Their next stop was the empty site of the old Heiho Palace, which now stood as a vast open field. Standing there, Tsukasa felt a strange sadness that so few traces of the past remained. Determined to preserve their own memories, she insisted they record a short video together, something they could look back on years later. That evening, Inishi gathered his courage, threw himself to the floor in dramatic Japanese fashion, and thanked Tsukasa from the bottom of his heart for saving his son's life. He admitted that he and Kanoka could never truly repay her. Tsukasa, touched by the gesture, promised she would always do her best to look after Nasa. Soon, it was time to leave. Before they departed, Tsukasa gifted Kanoka a small photo album, a collection of all the silly and sweet pictures she'd taken of Nasa during their trip. Kanoka was delighted, flipping through them as if they were national treasures. Though their stay had been short, Tsukasa told Nasa that she had enjoyed every moment, especially because she always felt at peace when they were together. Hours later, they returned to Tokyo, only to discover that their apartment had burned down. For a moment, Nasa stood in stunned silence, blinking at the smoldering remains of their home. Fortunately, Tsukasa had packed most of her belongings in her suitcase, proving once again that she was the brains of the operation. Nasa, meanwhile, was oddly calm, mostly because the tree they'd planted together, their little symbol of love, had miraculously survived the fire. His joy over a tree was so pure that Tsukasa couldn't help but laugh. Nasa reassured her not to worry, explaining that he had insurance, a safety deposit box, and backups for everything important. He was, after all, a man who planned for emergencies almost as much as he panicked about them. Feeling relieved, Tsukasa agreed when he suggested they head to a bathhouse to clean up and figure out their next move. While walking there, Tsukasa quietly admitted she was impressed by how calm and organized he was, despite losing their home. Nasa, trying not to blush, responded that he had only done what any responsible husband would do, though internally, he was still mourning his fried manga collection. At the bathhouse, while soaking in the warm water, Nasa's thoughts began to wander, mostly towards slightly impure things involving his wife and their new living situation. Just as his brain started short-circuiting, Kaname appeared out of nowhere, startling him back into reality. Kaname, ever the helpful friend and chaos generator, suggested that they stay at the bathhouse temporarily until they found a new place. Nasa, practically glowing with gratitude, agreed immediately. After giving them a tour of the building, Kaname mentioned she was worried about her younger sister Aya, who still had a massive crush on Nasa and hadn't quite grasped the fact that he was married. Kaname decided to break the news gently. When she told Aya that Nasa and Tsukasa would be staying with them, Aya's brain visibly crashed. Kaname tried to hint that the two were a couple, but Aya's balloon of a brain just couldn't process it. Moments later, Nasa himself entered, cheerfully thanking Aya for letting them stay. Aya smiled shyly, still oblivious to the shiny wedding ring on his finger. Nasa casually mentioned that he had recently taken Tsukasa to meet his parents in Nara, and Aya's mind finally started to connect the dots. Just as she was about to ask, their mother entered the room, announcing that she had just spoken with Nasa's wife. And that's when Aya's final brain cell finally clicked. The truth hit her like a freight train. Nasa wasn't her crushable senpai anymore. He was a married man. With the truth finally sinking in, Aya found herself torn between fury and heartbreak. Her mother, noticing her daughter's sorrow, comforted her gently by comparing Aya's situation to her own, reminding her that even she had been left behind by her husband once upon a time. Meanwhile, Nasa was filled with guilt over what had happened. But Kaname quickly reassured him, saying Aya would be fine. She even confessed that her own hesitation had stopped her from pursuing him back when she had the chance, because, let's face it, timing had never been her strongest suit. After shedding a few tears, Aya collected herself, stood tall again, and told Nasa to take good care of Tsukasa while she chased her dream of becoming a game streamer. It was her way of saying she'd move forward, console in hand and pride intact. A few days later, Tsukasa noticed they were running low on clean clothes. When Nasa offered to do the laundry, she turned beet red and refused, too embarrassed at the idea of him handling her underwear. But the ever-curious husband couldn't resist inspecting the pile anyway, unfortunately choosing the worst possible moment to take a sniff of Tsukasa's clothes. That was when Kaname caught him red-handed, or rather, red-nosed, calling him a filthy little pervert before dramatically storming off. Later, Tsukasa and Nasa took their laundry to the laundromat, where Tsukasa showed him how to properly wash clothes, since, as it turned out, his definition of clean had been alarmingly flexible. During their chore, she casually mentioned that she was only wearing a tracksuit that day, with no melon covers or peach armor. The poor boy nearly choked on air. Unable to resist the moment, Nasa sneakily snapped a photo, claiming it was for scientific documentation. Later that day, Kaname suggested Nasa take Tsukasa shopping to replace the clothes they'd lost in the fire, hinting that his wife might soon start looking more like a charming vagrant than a newlywed if he didn't. Taking her advice to heart, Nasa whisked Tsukasa off to the mall. At first, things went smoothly as she tried on various outfits, looking effortlessly stunning in each. But the real challenge came when they entered the underwear section. Nasa froze like a malfunctioning robot, face red enough to power a small furnace. To calm him down, Tsukasa gently held his hand, but the embarrassment was too much, and she eventually decided to shop alone. On their way back, Nasa, half teasing, half serious, asked if he might ever get to see her in those cute new sets. Both of them quickly dropped the topic, realizing it was far too dangerous for their blood pressure. After an evening at the bathhouse, Nasa noticed the room's old-fashioned charm and dreamed of someday moving into a newer place. Meanwhile, Tsukasa was busy preparing dinner, crispy fried pork with sauce, which delighted Nasa to his core. As a lover of fried foods, he declared that he could happily eat her cooking for the rest of his life. Just then, Kaname appeared carrying a luxurious muskmelon as a gift. The couple sliced it open and were nearly moved to tears by its divine sweetness. Nasa decided they had to repay Kaname's kindness somehow. In an effort to be romantic, he tried feeding Tsukasa a piece himself. She blushed furiously but let him, mostly because he reminded her she'd done the same for him during their travels. It was awkwardly cute, as most of their moments tended to be. The next morning, Nasa received a call from his old landlord, who invited him to view a brand new apartment. Kaname was secretly disappointed at the idea of them moving out. After all, she'd been thoroughly enjoying observing their awkward love story unfold under her roof. Still, the landlord offered them the same rent as before, so Nasa and Tsukasa went to take a look. The place was breathtaking. Elegant hallways, a scenic view from the balcony, and a bathroom so luxurious it could make anyone feel like royalty. Nasa instantly imagined sharing romantic baths there, while Tsukasa, less subtly, imagined the same. They both gawked at the king-sized bed, which made their old futon look like a postage stamp. As they left, Nasa resolved to work even harder to afford the new place, but Tsukasa reassured him that as long as they were together, anywhere could feel like home. The following day, Kaname described her morning routine at the bathhouse, waking at 5:30 a.m. to clean before school. When Tsukasa offered to help, Kaname initially refused, insisting that guests shouldn't work. But Tsukasa, ever the responsible one, insisted. Eventually, Kaname relented, and Tsukasa was surprised to see that Nasa's inventions had automated most of the chores. Still, she worked hard on the tougher spots, impressing Kaname with her diligence. Afterward, Kaname thanked Tsukasa for saving Nasa's life, admitting how much she admired him and how deeply he'd helped her family. Later that day, Tsukasa asked Nasa what his favorite food was. When he said curry, she immediately decided to make it for him. As they headed out for groceries, they ran into Kaname's mother, who mischievously advised Nasa to take his wife somewhere spicy to heat up their marriage. Poor Nasa, of course, completely missed the innuendo. As they walked, Tsukasa teased him for accidentally leading them into an abandoned park. She smirked and asked if he had any cultured intentions. He admitted he'd just planned to kiss her, but Tsukasa, self-conscious after eating a garlic bun, politely declined, leaving him adorably deflated. Still, she admitted she liked the peace of the park. It felt like the world had stopped just for them. Nasa couldn't resist hugging her from behind, accidentally grabbing a bit too much in the process. Tsukasa squeaked in surprise but confessed the hug felt nice. When Nasa nervously asked if she was happy to be married to him, she smiled and said yes, because life with him was always full of new experiences. The two embraced, bathed in soft evening light and mutual awkwardness. Days later, Chitose and her maids discovered the burnt remains of Nasa and Tsukasa's old apartment. Coincidentally, Tsukasa happened to pass by, prompting them to bombard her with questions. When she jokingly said she was living in the local playground, Chitose nearly fainted in horror and rushed to inspect the play structures, only for Tsukasa to sneak away mid-chaos. Meanwhile, Nasa found an old grilling machine among their things and decided to host a taco party. He invited Aya and Kaname, though Kaname warned him that Aya was still feeling awkward about his marriage. Just as they were preparing, Chitose burst dramatically into the bathhouse after tracking Tsukasa down. Tsukasa, ever the prankster, claimed she was living on the floor of the bathhouse, and the naive Chitose believed her immediately. Nasa quickly intervened to save Chitose from her own overactive imagination, explaining they were simply staying in a borrowed room. Chitose and her maids then explored the bathhouse, and to everyone's surprise, they loved it. When Chitose asked why Tsukasa didn't just live at her mansion instead, Tsukasa said it was because Chitose didn't own a game console. Chitose immediately vowed to buy every gaming system on Earth if it meant convincing Tsukasa to move in, though Aya, another gamer at heart, accidentally got swept up in her enthusiasm. Later that evening, as everyone gathered for the taco party, Aya challenged Tsukasa to prove herself as a worthy wife by cooking something amazing. The competition quickly escalated into a Street Fighter showdown, because in anime logic, that was the natural next step. As the match began, Nasa admitted he enjoyed games too, especially classics like Minesweeper and Solitaire, which didn't exactly earn him any cool points. Aya demolished Tsukasa in the first round, but when they switched to the retro version, Tsukasa's inner gamer awakened, and the match ended in a dramatic tie. The others, Kaname, Chitose, and her maids, watched the chaos unfold like an esports crowd. In the end, no one even remembered the prize. Pride had become the real trophy. When it was all over, the group turned their attention back to food, laughter, and good company. As Chitose watched Nasa and Tsukasa happily cooking side by side, she finally started to accept their marriage. Her maids teased her mercilessly about it, and she admitted that as long as Tsukasa was happy, she'd stop plotting. When Nasa later asked Tsukasa what she would have wished for if she'd won the tournament, she smiled sweetly and rewarded him with a kiss, arguably a prize far better than bragging rights. The next morning, Nasa woke up to a message that sent shivers down his spine. The system at work had crashed. It was, apparently, a critical level emergency, the kind of situation that made programmers age 10 years in a day. When Tsukasa noticed his troubled face, she gently reminded him not to overwork himself, knowing all too well that her husband's version of taking it easy usually involved 10 hours of non-stop coding and mild dehydration. But, as expected, Nasa dived straight into fixing the issue with heroic determination and predictable consequences. After hours of relentless work, his body finally gave in, and he came down with a fever. Seeing him pale and flushed, Tsukasa immediately switched into full nurse mode. She spent the day caring for him, keeping a cool towel on his forehead and checking his temperature like a pro. That night, as he lay resting, she used another damp cloth to cool him down. But when her hand wandered a little too low, Nasa panicked and begged her to stop before she awakened his inner rock. Tsukasa rolled her eyes so hard she probably saw her own brain, but she couldn't help smiling. Later that night, as the two lay side by side, Nasa felt a gentle pressure on his hand. He opened his eyes to find Tsukasa holding it softly. Thinking he might be dreaming, he stayed quiet until she suddenly hugged him from behind, whispering that she'd been worried about him all day. Her voice trembled just enough to melt his fever-stricken heart. Nasa turned toward her, and they shared a tender kiss. But when he tried to sneak in another, she smacked him lightly on the chest, scolding him to rest first, romance later. By morning, Nasa had recovered, just in time for Kaname to remind Tsukasa that, as a married woman, she absolutely had to wear a yukata if they planned to attend the upcoming festival. Taking the advice seriously, Tsukasa picked out matching yukatas for them both. When she finished dressing, Nasa couldn't resist asking for a peek. Tsukasa sighed, amused, and allowed him a quick glance, only for him to freeze, utterly captivated by her beauty. His stunned silence lasted long enough for her to give him a quick kiss, before warning him that if he didn't hurry, they'd miss the festival entirely. That evening, as they arrived at the lively summer fair, Nasa was in full tourist mode, snapping pictures of Tsukasa at every stall like a man documenting proof that angels walk the earth. Tsukasa's first stop was naturally food. She went straight for the traditional festival tacos, declaring them the fuel of champions. While eating, they stumbled upon Kaname and Aya working at a goldfish catching booth to support local businesses. Tsukasa proudly boasted that she was great at the game and challenged Nasa to impress her. His result? Not a single goldfish, but plenty of water splashed on his face. He claimed he was testing the scoop's aerodynamics, though no one was buying it. Afterward, the couple visited a nearby shrine. There, Tsukasa clasped her hands, closed her eyes, and made a quiet wish. For a long and happy marriage, and for Nasa's good health. When she told him what she'd wished for, he was deeply moved. She confessed that while she admired his dedication to work, she often worried about him pushing himself too hard. Nasa wrapped his arms around her, touched by her thoughtfulness, and promised he'd try to take better care of himself. Tsukasa smiled and said she just wanted him to live a long, healthy life, preferably one where he didn't code himself into an early grave. Soon after, they were joined by their friends, Kaname, Aya, and even Chitos, for the fireworks show. As the sky lit up with dazzling bursts of color, Nasa admitted he'd taken dozens of photos of Tsukasa that evening, swearing he'd never delete a single one, even if some looked embarrassingly love-struck. Tsukasa blushed but didn't protest. Secretly, she found it sweet. Together, surrounded by laughter and shimmering fireworks, the couple stood side by side, their hands brushing lightly. Nasa glanced at her and whispered that he wanted them to watch the fireworks like this every year, for the rest of their lives. Tsukasa turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the colors in the sky, and nodded with a gentle smile. The night air was filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet promise of a love that would only grow stronger. As the final fireworks faded into the starlit sky, Nasa thought to himself that no matter what challenges awaited them next, whether broken appliances, nosebleed-inducing laundry mishaps, or dramatic friends, their bond would endure it all. After all, in a world full of chaos, he'd found his calm in her. And with that, the young couple's story continued. Sometimes clumsy, often hilarious, but always full of heart.